Would you do something wrong because an authority figure said to? Welcome to Critical Thinking Scan, where we look at how you can think about any faith-challenging message and arrive at a biblical, logical conclusion yourself. I'm Patricia Engler, and today I'm going to share some pretty intense research about the psychological power of authority. Back in the video about the fifth check of critical thinking, check for propaganda, I mentioned that often messages sound persuasive when they come from an authoritative source, like a scientist or a professor. Of course, the kind of person sharing a message doesn't itself tell us whether the message is true. So arguing that something is true only because an authoritative expert said so is a fallacy called appeal to authority. But because of the psychological power of authority, we may feel obligated to go along with the message even if we know it's not right. And some famous experiments in the 1960s by a psychologist named Stanley Milgram showed that. The study went like this. Imagine you see an ad that a researcher will pay you to take part in a scientific study of memory and learning. You show up at the lab where you meet an experimenter in a lab coat and another civilian who's also come to take part in the experiment. The civilian is a mild, grandfatherly guy with glasses, and you don't realize that he's actually an actor in the study. The experimenter hands you and the actor a hat holding two slips of paper, which will determine your roles in the study. You pick one of the papers and see the word teacher written on it, not realizing that both papers said teacher, so that would have been your role either way. Meanwhile, the actor takes the role of learner. Next, the experimenter leads you both to a room where you watch him strap the learner into an electric shock generator. Then the experimenter takes you to another room where you can hear but not see the learner, and he sits you in front of a control panel for the shock device. Now, the shocks don't actually work, but you don't realize that. The controls range from a 15-volt slight shock to a voltage labeled danger severe shock to a final 450-volt shock labeled XXX. You're given a list of word pairs to read to the learner, who is supposed to remember the correct pairings when prompted. If he answers incorrectly, the researcher tells you to give the learner a shock, adding 15 volts for every wrong answer, to study how punishment affects learning and memory. Now, if you're like most people, you'd probably feel really uncomfortable being told to hurt another person. But many people who participated in this study went ahead with it, delivering ever-increasing shocks to the actor until he banged on the wall, complained of a heart condition, started screaming, and eventually fell silent. If participants wanted to stop the study, the experimenter gave them 4 spoken prods in this order. Please continue. The experiment requires that you continue. It is absolutely essential that you continue, and you have no other choice. You must go on. As a result, Milner found that over 60% of participants went all the way up to delivering the 450-volt shock against their will just because an authoritative researcher was telling them to. Now, this study clearly had some ethical concerns, and some psychologists question other parts of the research methods, pointing out that some participants figured out the experiment was a hoax. But replications of these experiments over time have shown similar results, that well over half of people will do something they know isn't right because an authority figure says to. Now, let's think about this in the context of university classrooms. My professors never told me to shock anyone, but they did tell me to believe things I knew weren't right based on what the Bible says, like human evolution. And the fact that these messages were coming from authoritative professors made them sound true, even though logically a message's source does not affect its truth. Still, understanding the power of authority can help us recognize why unbiblical messages can sound persuasive and remind us that our only true authority is God and His Word, not man's word. For more on how to think critically about any message which challenges the Bible's teaching, you can access my other CT Scan videos packed with tactics, tips, and tools that helped me as a Christian student at secular university. Thank you for watching. Hey, it's Patricia. Just wanted to let you know that if you like these videos, a free, easy way to help Answers in Genesis Canada produce more content and equip more people to defend their faith is to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, click the bell, and of course share these resources. I know you might hear that kind of thing a lot, but the reason these actions are so important is they inform social media algorithms to help these videos reach more people who can benefit from them. And that's especially helpful because advertising is super expensive. But this way, even media platforms which are often unfriendly towards biblical content become tools to promote gospel outreach for free. And if you're on board to share this message of biblical authority and want to give, you can also make a one-time donation or become a monthly supporter by clicking the link below. Thank you so much.